screen failure when I started. Even in days when you have to submit 2 grants to get 1, I was still a failure because I didn't know. I thought science is a pure discipline. You just submit a good idea and reviewers will say, oh yeah, this is the money. Sorry. I was so mad that my reviews for my first submission came, all the 3 reviewers started by saying, this proposal is very poorly written. And they went, oh, not writing poetry, a story, a book, an article. This is science, man. Look at the diagrams, look at the beautiful experiments. No. I learned little by little that writing is as important as the good idea that you do have. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. We have a lot of content to cover, so I'm going to be going a little bit fast, but you're going to be getting the slide deck, hopefully today or tomorrow at the latest. So let's get going here and see. I always do this the wrong way. Where do I point? Am I pointing at myself? Hello? Anybody? How do I type that? No, it has. That's all right. Good.
Can you just
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it.
Everything? Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do this one.
Go through this one. Okay. It's frozen too.
Oh no. Oh. Is that fine for you?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, thank you. All right. First of all, why do you want to apply for a proposal at this stage of your career? Most of you are graduate students and postdocs, correct? Yeah. So first of all, to learn as early as possible, tricks of the trade. Secondly, you will have this on your CV, you know how to write grants, you will be very attractive on the job market, either for industry or academia. And also you will have some freedom from your advisor, a little bit. You have your own money, you can do your own experiments if you want. Not going haywire, of course, because you and your advisor are a team. And you're there to learn from your advisor tricks of the trade as well. Let's see if this thing is working now. Wow, it is working. Yes, and also it will make you focus a lot on the idea of your thesis project. You're going to be thinking of experiments to do ahead and design them very well and very carefully that will make your project progress quicker and smoother. So it's all good. Do you want me to turn this slide off or, yeah? Is there a way to dim the front lights? Probably here. I don't know. All right. Okay, so to start with, as a template, there is the NIH pre-doctoral fellowship program. It's widely known as F31. And I'm going to use this as an example, but really the template could apply to anything else. The format may be different depending on the requirement of the specific agency, but the principles apply across agencies. So you have to be enrolled in an individual, in a PhD program. It provides stipend, health fees, tuition, and travel. So review criteria for seasoned investigators. When we apply for a grant, they look at the science, at the environment, and productivity of the applicant. These are also the same here, but in addition, we do assess very carefully the training environment. Your advisor, how good they are at advising, their career history in advising, and how you're going to be interacting with the advisor, what other career development activities you're going to be having during your training. So this is how they assess you: academic records, potential for becoming an independent investigator. I mean, this is, you have to demonstrate this very clearly. Also, commitment to a future in research, a career in research. NIH used to be very blinded to anything but academia. Believe it or not, maybe 10 years ago, this used to read commitment to a career in academia. And if they just sniff any wish that you want to go to industry, that was a, no, we don't want to pay this person who's going to leave this great environment and go somewhere else. How many people want to go to industry? All right, me too. Yeah, anytime I had a deadline to renew my grants, I just had the urge to call my friends in industry and say, do you have a job? I'm really tired of this. But for those who want the academy, it's a great environment too. It's a lot of hard work, but it's an addictive process. We choose to get addicted to it. We know that we're putting in a lot more than we're getting back, but that's our choice, and it's fun. So your advisor's qualifications, publications, and funding. They actually have to have funding right now that is active, that will in part support your project. Stature in the field, be it a Nobel Prize winner, a person who's invited all over the place, to give presentations, known in their field. Track record of mentoring individuals at the same career stage, including placements. NIH had the same fault here too. It used to say, including, please emphasize how many of your trainees went to academia. Now they know better. And then the research training plan. They want you to, this is a training fellowship. They want you to get as much as the best training ever out of this. So the quality of your research project, how the research plan parallels your specific career goals, proposed time frame, and that is a trap that most junior investigators or junior applicants fall in. They propose too much. They are very smart, they have many ideas, boom, boom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until 10, 12, 20 aims for the project. And the reviewer looks at this and says, in 3 years, are you kidding? So be realistic. And the impact of your project in its entirety, the impact of your training, of the research idea, of filling the gap in knowledge. What change are you going to make in the field if they give you this money? Institutional environment, definitely equipment and core facilities. Intellectual power, how many of your colleagues around are involved in the same type of research? Do you get together to discuss? Do you have journal clubs? Do you have lab meetings and so on? Seminars, career development workshops like this one, and institutional commitment to professional development. Again, this workshop indicates institutional commitment to advancing your career. let's face it, they're paying me like, what, $2 million in Subway sandwiches for giving this seminar. Just kidding. Oh, this is recording. I should be careful. I don't own any stocks in Subway. Other resources. In addition to NIH, you have NSF, of course, health organizations like the WHO and the like, professional societies, American Heart Association, American Epilepsy Association, and then public and private foundations. There are many of these that are not well publicized. And if the university has a very good database that is searchable for public and private foundations. And if you are intimidated by it, you can go to a librarian and they will help you look for these. Why is this? Why I would like to emphasize this is because many people go fishing in these two pools in the very beginning and to start with. So they are outfished, more or less. These are not very well publicized, and you'll find also that they are tailored to very specific type of fellows. For example, someone who wants to go work in a college that its function is mainly teaching, not an R01 type of a university. It has, many of them have specific requirements for specific ethnicity or family background and so on, so that competition is not as fierce as the general ones. Application has many components to it, but we're going to go through them. I put this ahead to mention that every component is very important. And the link and the flow of the reader, what you give the reader to read, is very important. I don't know if I have the slides here, but I usually mimic the process of application for a fellowship or a grant as fishing. 2 steps to get a fish. I'm talking to Minnesotans now. 1 is a good lure, something that get the fish interested, to come close, take a look, and maybe bite the hook. But that doesn't mean you got the fish. The hook is here. You attracted the reviewer's attention instantly from the very beginning with the abstract and so on. The other trick to get the fish is to reel it in slowly, and it's fighting. It's a big musky, and until you get it to the net and then to the boat. Now you got the fish. So the reeling step is how to keep this fish, the reviewer, still attracted and willing to read with enthusiasm throughout the entire proposal. You have to keep them enthused. You have to remind them how good this is and that they should put their money in that direction. Any questions so far? Okay. So, what to do prior to starting to write? I think this is a very important stage. Before you start writing, before you focus or decide on a direction, you really have to do a lot of homework. You have to study yourself, study the field, and decide what is it that you would like to do, what question you would like to ask. And I'm going to be talking about the criteria of the question that you ask. But you have to read successful proposals, and many granting agencies have postings of successful proposals of various kinds on their website, starting with the NIH. They have very good examples of successful proposals or fellowships. And you attend as many of these writing workshops as possible. Each of us has different experiences, and what I say hopefully may not be necessarily different from what somebody else would say, but someone else may tackle the problem from a different angle due to their own experience. And for me, the best experience, as my introducer mentioned, is having served on review committees. If you ever get a chance to be invited to serve, do not say no, say yes. It's time consuming, you don't get paid much, and the experience really is overwhelming. Because you sit around and you have 30 reviewers here around the table, and you look at each grant and you think, you sense what gets them enthusiastic and what gets them upset and what gets them real angry mad. And I used to write these down and keep a list of them, and even some wording, like, you know, some they don't like the word explore. Explore like what? You know, just walk in the woods and look for frogs and stuff like that. Believe it or not, that used to be science. Sorry for going into different directions. My mind is not straightforward. If you read Nature, the journal Nature, very highly esteemed one, we publish every once in a while, 100 years ago in Nature, papers that were published in Nature then. And they are like this. Myself and Sir Malcolm were walking in the woods up in northern England, and we saw a frog that has 5 legs. We held the frog in our hand, and you know, stuff like this. This used to be published. This was science, real science, that did not require a grant to support it. Anyways, back to our own interest here. Yes. For a successful application, you have to focus on a hot area of the discipline to impress the reviewers. Here I have to caution you that while it is important to address hot areas, don't run after the sheep, the rest of the sheep, just blindly, because this is the fashion nowadays. So this is what you need to do. I mean, things went up and down all the time. Monoclonal antibodies were the fashion at one point. Cloning came later, and genetic engineering and whatever. Be faithful to what your passion is. You know, still apply modern technology, but be faithful to what you're passionate about, because your passion will be reflected in what you write and what you present. So again, be realistic with the time. You're planning a project that could be done within the 3 years of your dissertation time. I am a person who's against what's called a tenured graduate student, i.e. forever and ever you stay here being a graduate student. No, this is a phase. Postdoc is also a phase of your life. You're preparing to move forward to something higher and better in terms of independence. You have to demonstrate clear knowledge of the subject matter and demonstrate your familiarity of the topic. Some make a mistake by saying, this question has never been asked before, or this idea has not been addressed before, and this is terrible if one of the old, crabby reviewers is sitting there and looking at this and saying, I published on this in 1899, and you are saying it has never been looked at? Scratch, throw in the garbage. So be careful what you claim. Do not use never, and do not justify the project you want to do by saying, I'm doing this because it hasn't been done. That's not good justification. Many things have not been done because they are not important. No one cares. It's a silly question. Yes, and you have to demonstrate how the project matches your advisor's experience, and the fellowship provides opportunity for training. This is generally important because sometimes a student will go to a lab and they have their own idea, their own direction, that sometimes does not really fit the expertise of the lab. It's good to be independent, but you're there to be trained. You're there to be mentored, to shadow someone who knows what they are doing. So if you're going to a biology lab that does wet bench experiments, and you're interested in, say, theoretical mathematical approaches to science, that's the wrong place for you. If you make mistakes, no one is going to be there to guide you. The lab will benefit from you because you're bringing this experience, but you will not benefit from the lab. So independence has limits to it that are good for you. It's a matchmaking expedition. If you're applying to the American Heart Association and you're working on the brain, that's a wrong fit. If you're applying for an epilepsy grant to the Epilepsy Foundation and your project investigates why do our fingers get numb in cold weather, that is not a good match. Start writing early. Have like a guide, an index to what you're going to be writing about, bullets, and then write in small, manageable parts. Break your sentences, break your paragraphs, have space between paragraphs, have margins. Most of us want to put in as much wording as we want, and that's uncomfortable for the reviewer to read. They will just get confused, and you don't want this confusion to take place. Revise, and this requires starting early and consult with others. At any stage of anybody's career, I highly recommend they do run drafts by their colleagues, and even with coming up with the very focus of the project, that's the brainstorming stage I talked about. Run it by other people. Say, here's what's known in the field, and here's this gap in knowledge. Please help me assess. How serious is this gap in knowledge? Will the world still go around if we don't answer these questions? Are these questions important? Are they focused? Are they convincible to the funding agency? The more consultation ahead of time or at the early stages, the better off you will be. Very similar to a painting. You sketch something with pencil on the canvas, and at this stage it's very easy to change things around. Look at it from a distance, come back tomorrow and look at it. Once you fill in with colors and so on, you've already committed. You're going to paint a bird or a house or a cloud or an airplane. And at that point, your mind is not going to be as flexible as it used to be in the early stages of the project or the painting. All right. These are actual quotes. The key to success in grant writing is to engender enthusiasm in the reviewer, who becomes an advocate for your proposal. Therefore, always write your application for the reviewer, not yourself. So if you're fishing for bass, use bass lures, surface lures. Wednesdays, use a pink bobber. I'm just kidding. There are all of these myths in my family about what fish like colors. Today's pink. Everybody changes to pink. I don't think fish see color, but I could be wrong. But anyways, imagine yourself as the reviewer and write for them and think what you're looking for. And this I'm going to be talking about. What are the criteria they use to evaluate each application? So here are the 3 pillars. Impact of the research question is going to really matter to answer this question. How you present it. Luck. What is luck? We're talking science now. We're talking about logical people who look at something and compare it as it is. No. A reviewer gets a bunch of applications. It used to be paper like this. Now it's a little file, but you open it and you have to read this much still. And you have a short deadline to reply, prepare your reviews. The reviewer is a human being. If it was a computer, then luck would not matter. But a reviewer is a human being. She or he have different circumstances. You'll be very unlucky if the reviewer reads your grant after their favorite football team lost. Or if their mother-in-law is knocking at the door. Poor my mother-in-law, I always make fun of her. She's a great lady. Actually, she's not with us. So sorry for involving her. Even the sequence of the review process. Usually grants that are reviewed in the very beginning, when people have a lot of time, you get a lot of discussion. And believe it or not, a lot of discussion is bad. The more they dig in, the more faults they're going to find. And the more people who did not even read the grant will look through it and say, oh, here is a mistake. Usually statisticians do it. You always start by, anybody statistics here? All right, good, then I'll feel free to say. You start by saying, I have not read the grant, but this t-test is not the correct one. If I were the chair of the session, once I hear the word, I have not read the grant, I would say, shut up. So you do not have the right to contribute to the discussion. You have not read the grant. You're just reading a couple of words out of context and making judgments that affect someone's career. But it happens. At the very end, it's the same. People are tired, crabby, wanting to run to catch their planes, and they just want to quickly finish their job. So maybe the first reviewer, if they are negative, the second reviewer may not take a lot of time to rebut. So it really depends. Depends on if your application gets reviewed after the most shining application in the stack, or if it gets reviewed, to your good luck, after an application that really sucks. All of these are elements of luck. Why I mention this is not to scare you, but to be prepared for it. You have no control of what will happen. But I want you to focus on these two to minimize the element of luck as much as possible. Just eliminate it. I write my grants for my enemies who are crabby, who are upset, who do not like me, who do not like that direction of science, to still say, oh my gosh, this is a piece of art. If you've seen the movie Mozart a long time ago, maybe you're not born. I think it's a movie about Mozart. He had an enemy. I forgot his name, but Solari, something like that. And he hated Mozart. But every time he listens to his music, listen to this. And he, so imagine this is your reviewer, and you're just presenting them with the most beautiful and convincing idea that they're going to buy no matter what. That they're going to hate themselves if they say no to that. You feel guilty and die immediately. So we'll start with failures, bad elements, negative elements for proposals. Absence of an acceptable scientific rationale. It's just an idea that you threw out of the blue. It's just, this is what I want to do. Has not been done before. Would be good for you. Pay me. Experimental approach is not really scientifically well developed. Controls are lacking, and so on. So overly ambitious in terms of time, lack of sufficient experimental details, uncertainty concerning future directions. When you write a proposal and you're proposing experiments that will be done in the next 3 years, you have to show the reviewer that you have further outlook to the future. What is the next step? If this project gets done, is it done and over with, or are there sequels in the future? And you don't know the outcome of the project, so you cannot really commit yourself 100% to a certain direction. You can't present your narrative as saying, if the results show us this direction, then in the future we'll go further in that direction. If it goes this way, we're going to go that way. Usually, reviewers would like to see some evidence that you have, either from the literature, from your data that you have so far, that you are going to get the answer that you're expecting. So you have a hypothesis. You're hypothesizing that, bless you, cold causes frostbite. This is the hypothesis. And it has to be as strong as that. And that's a very valid hypothesis because there are many data showing this, there's personal experience showing this. The reviewers do not like it when you say, I'm going to investigate whether cold, severe cold causes frostbite. Weather is really shaky. We're just on the fence. So this you have to demonstrate. On the other hand, you cannot go as far as being wedded to that direction. You should be open to findings that show that the hypothesis is incorrect. And that usually develops the best type of science that changes fields, that you do something expecting a result, and then it ends up going in a different direction. And that's general lesson to you when you do an experiment and you go to your advisor and say, no, the experiment didn't work. I usually say, sit down. What does it mean? The rat ran out of the lab, or the dish fell on the floor and broke, and they say, no, it didn't give me what I expected. Oh, hey, this does not mean the experiment didn't work the way you were expecting. Let us see why it did not work the way you expected. There are many examples of Nobel Prizes that resulted exactly from this. A person who gets odd results, different from everybody in the lab, the investigator, the primary investigator, goes to the lab and watches what this person does and what differences there are, be it the buffer or the way they prepare the tissue or what have you, and then find a factor that is so essential for the process that they were investigating. So in general, do not dismiss odd results, especially if they are reproducible. All right. This one I recommend, please, to you print out, you put it in front of your desktop, you put it on the back of your laptop, and remember it forever. It's a summary of all what matters in writing a fellowship or a grant. What questions are you asking? Why? What is the justification for posing these specific questions? How? What's the experimental approach you're going to use to answer these questions? who are you, and who is your advisor who is mentoring you if you're applying for a fellowship? Where are you in terms of environment? How rich is that environment? What is new? How are you going to change the field by answering these questions? Most importantly, and most insulting, who really cares? This is the bottom line. Impact, impact, impact. It's good science in looking, I really don't know what kind of science you're doing. I don't want to insult anybody. I declare I am biased to the type of work that I'm doing. This has relevance to life. But there are types of research that are important if there are tons of monies for everybody to do, and that after we solve all the big problems in life. For example, why does a worm turn around 3 times and then backward 3 times, like a foxtrot type of a dance? No, probably there's relevance to this, but if money's tight, I would probably give money to a project that cures an animal disease or cures a disease of this worm or something like this. So before I get myself in trouble, I'm going to shut up and move on. But who really cares is very important. So how do you come up with a compelling, underline, underscore this? Yeah, I came from Egypt, and way back in 1977, my luck sent me to Rochester, Minnesota, without knowing how cold the weather gets. But I remember my advisor when I wrote my first paper, and he reviewed it and edited it. He had that statement in the very end. Our results underscore something, the importance or whatever. And I went to him and I said, underscore? Are we really shooting ourselves in the foot? Like, underscore, isn't this like down? He said, no. And in America, underscores is up. So I took it for granted, and he's right. So anyways, background knowledge. Look at entire sea of knowledge available. Identify a gap in knowledge, and not any gap. Evaluate that it's a significant gap in knowledge that is important to fill. Develop compelling, again the word compelling, plan to fill the gap. And compelling, if you think about this, what is compelling? What would make a research question compelling or an approach compelling? To me, this means that you tackle this specific question from so many different directions, and hopefully all of these directions will result in answering the same question and supporting your hypothesis. So an example in my field is, if you think an enzyme is important for something, all right, use an inhibitor for the enzyme and see, does it affect memory or learning or what have you, what function. A reviewer may look at this and say, hey, this specific inhibitor is non-specific. It affects other things. So it's not working only on this enzyme that you love, but it's working on so many other things. So you cannot really interpret the data to support your hypothesis. So how do I add, what's the noun for compelling? Compilation? How do I make this more compelling? Use a series of enzyme inhibitors that you know vary in potency, and prove that they inhibit learning and memory in the same rank order as they do in inhibiting the enzyme. Now we've made your argument more compelling. Then find a collaborator who works on genetics and work with them to get a knockout mouse model that lacks this enzyme. And then see, does this mouse still remember? Does it learn? Does it recall? So you see, this is really compelling. You're using all of these findings to answer the same question, but from different directions. Many of us in research make a mistake of being familiar with certain methodology and just looking for questions that could be answered by this methodology, and that's the wrong approach. Do not limit yourself at your early stage of learning and development to this. Look for techniques that could help answer the question and propose you learn these techniques, either from your advisor or from a collaborator with the advisor. Any questions about a compelling plan? Do you feel compelled? Yes, please.
How do you balance being realistic with a time frame and not being too ambitious with coming up with a plan that tackles a problem from all angles?
Well, that's a very good question. How do you balance being ambitious and finding a compelling way to answer the question with not being overambitious in the timeline and so on? Well, I would rather ask fewer questions in a compelling way than several questions in a just surface way.
So I have the following
Yes,
question.
please.
So, if we didn't do this method before, is it do not limit to the methodology? If we haven't done anything related before, how do we persuade the reviewer that we are capable to do this?
Yeah, if you're not familiar with the methodology, how do you convince reviewers that it's okay to propose experiments that use this experiment? Definitely find a co-advisor who specializes in this technology. And maybe, since it's new to you and new to your advisor, if you do just one experiment using this technique to show that you can work it out, that would be very helpful. But, I mean, reviewers like this proactive approach, but you're right, you do like evidence that you know what you're doing. Or you have somebody who helps you, who knows what you're doing. Other questions?
I had a question.
Yes, sir.
Earlier you mentioned not to be too independent and work outside of the capabilities. And you just mentioned having a collaborator that could develop knockout mice. What would come first, the grant or the collaboration?
Well, if you, the question is about pursuing new directions and finding a collaborator, and when should this happen? If you're going to propose this experiment in the proposal, then you do need to identify the collaborator at that time and mention them and have a letter from them saying they have this technology available, they have published so many publications on it, and that the experiments you're proposing are feasible, and so on. Yeah. Others? All right. Moving on. Where are we going? All right. Here are criteria for a good research idea or problem. A clear focus. Focus is very important. Look at your entire proposal as a bicycle wheel, where you have the center, that's the main idea, the gap that you need to fill. Everything you do is one of the spokes coming out of this focus. It's all going to filling this gap. Anything that's peripheral, toss away and keep for another application or another future experiment. Is your idea novel? Again, be careful saying it has not been done before. It could be, the question could have been asked many times before, but novelty comes from your approach. That there are now methods that could answer this question in a more compelling way, or you have an environment that was more conducive to answering this question in a compelling way. A balance between what do you call high-risk science and novelty and reality. Scientists, unfortunately, sometimes they fight the advance of science by being trained to go from A to B to C. Among us, there are only very few Einsteins who just forgot about the ABC, went from A to Z right away. Just you see through it. It's Einstein, believe it or not, I don't think if he had ever written a proposal, it would ever get funded. Just all over the place. You know, bring this and you do the power of 2 and bring this and you do it. What is this? This guy's crazy. You know. So this type of science, while it will really advance the field, it will cause a revolution, it will not get funded just because of the mentality of the reviewers and their programmed brain. So have a reasonable mix between novel, very, very novel, and what's feasible. If it's very novel and very risky, you have to prove and provide some experimental data that support, indeed, that your idea or your question will be answered in the direction that you do expect. Okay, you have to ask yourself, why hasn't someone done this before? And as I said, one of the possible answers is no one cares. It's not irrelevant or high impact question. Idea and time, length of time, and are you the one to test it in terms of training? Is this research direction a logical extension of your and your advisor's past or current research? Very important, does it fit the goals of the funding agency? Impact on the field in general, but I cannot emphasize this or underscore this high enough. Your level of passion. It's so easy to read a proposal from a very passionate person, and you can really tell. It's just full of love. It's just warm and inviting. It doesn't have to have fancy words and so on, but this person really is dying to know this answer. You want to give them the money before they die. A bad research idea based solely on recent technological advances, i.e., guy who, in a field where somebody screened 100 urine samples using HPLC or whatever to find something. Now there's a new HPLC machine. Well, I propose to screen the same 100 samples using the new HPLC machine. No, really, you're not changing much, so no money. Something that's not related to a specific hypothesis. Reviewers call this fishing expedition, stamp collection. You're just doing experiments and we will see what happens. We will see what will transpire and go from there. And that's not planned good science. You have to plan better than this. And Yeah, things are going up and down. Again, if you're looking for things going up and down without a specific focus or relating it to a hypothesis, is another example of stem collection that is not appreciated. So now we're coming to the meat. We talked about the reviewer and how to write for the reviewer. Two essential elements. Keep review criteria in mind and keep reviewers in mind. In general, applies across the board to different agencies. Reviewers look for this or are instructed to look for these. Significance of the question, and that's the impact, methodology, the experimental design, innovation, how new it is. So innovation and significance or impact are very much related. Your background, your advisor's background and qualifications, your general environment, and what other elements of training you're going to have during the grant period. So you make sure you address all of these adequately when you write a proposal. This is when I was young. I looked like that. That's how I imagined reviewers when I sent a proposal. That all the 30 people sitting around the table are from my field. They know my language. They would appreciate, would understand readily what I'm proposing and why it's important. Definitely wrong. And that they have nothing else in life to do but to review applications. Wrong. Have unlimited patience, meaning that they read Issam's proposal and didn't make sense, was not clear, we didn't get the idea of what does this guy want to do. And the reviewer says, well, make me give Issam the benefit of the doubt. At least sleep on it. Read it the next day. Nope, there's no time for that. It's first read, first judgment. Reality, that's me when I'm old. Reviewers have mixed expertise. Your application has to appeal to the expert and the non-expert alike. And in fact, it's very common that each application is assigned to 3 reviewers. The first one is likely an expert in the field. Second one, they have taken a course or something in it. Third one has no idea. You could be a virologist and this person is a bacteriologist, for example. So they are there to be educated, essentially. You are educating them to love your grant. So that's how you should style your grant, to be appealing to everybody. They are overcommitted, very busy. They have so many things to do. Sometimes they are skeptical, like this guy here looking for mistakes, or this guy who just wants to smash anything that comes his way or her way. Why is this? It's because of the lack of money. That you have, for big grants, you have 10% at best being funded. So reviewers start with the assumption, all of these look bad unless proven otherwise. So read them and then find one that says, oh, that's not bad. Let me move it to that other side. Because they know that only 10% could be funded. So they save the 10% for the best written proposals. I don't know if I'm going to talk about this or not, but because reviewers have mixed expertise, have your proposal critiqued by colleagues who are in the field and out of the field. And in fact, I include our neighbors, I included my mother-in-law, bless her, when she was alive, just to give her the first page of the proposal and say, Mom, just look at this and tell me, did you get it? And usually her first question, which is a very important question, is, it's good, but hasn't this been done before? She doesn't know, she's just agitating. Hasn't this been done before? Because most people think if it's that good, someone should have done it before. This is a very critical question that you cannot assume the reviewer to know the answer to without you leading to this answer. No, it has not been done before, or yes, has been done but poorly or half-cooked. And I am the one who's going to really answer it in a very compelling way. Yep, that's a reviewer. So what do they expect? What do reviewers expect? Interesting, innovative idea, supported by either background, literature, or by preliminary data. That you are the one to do this and do it justice. A research plan that is well thought out. Well thought out includes expecting challenges. That there may be, say, if you are using aged animals and you're breeding them, and say one of the challenges is an infection in the colony. Well, it's very possible, it happens. What are you going to do if your colony gets infected? Do you have a backup plan? Do you have another collaborator where you can get animals from them until you restart breeding your own? Is there a firm that sells those aged animals? Things like that. You have to expect potential pitfalls and find solutions for them ahead of time before the reviewers see through and say, well, you know, what if? Do not assume smooth sailing of the project from beginning to end. Yep. It's not science, it is the marketing of science. We are salesmen, saleswomen when we propose scientific projects. We are very honest salespeople by not hiding things. We are upfront about potential pitfalls and challenges. Make life easy for the reviewers to go through the application and maybe not, if they don't want to read the whole, if they don't want to read the whole thing, using labels and headings, they can go to a certain section and read that or emphasize reading on that. Keep it short and simple. Go from basic to complex, key points, non-technical. You're writing to both reviewers in the field and outside of the field. Something that is very distracting to anybody is acronyms. I'm going to show an example about this, but just imagining one. I'm going to look at CBS's influence on THC that is convoluted with ABC that downregulates NBC. Yeah, maybe you mentioned this, the definition of these acronyms in page 1, but you have the reviewer going back and forth, what's NBC, what's AHC, and you don't want this distraction. You want clear flow of the reviewer's reading of the application. Graphics are so important. If you can summarize the background knowledge, 3 sentences, an arrow, the gap, and then branching arrows, how are you going to fill this gap? What questions you're going to be answering? At a glance, this is very important and worth the space. Edit and proof. And this is important, more important now than in the past because of the God bless it spell checker that lets words go through that are correctly spelled, but you have the wrong word. They caused laughter around the committee. One of them was the applicant said, we're doing experiments and I'm going to be holding the moose on my hand to inject it with the drug. All right, holding the moose instead of the mouse. We know it's a mistake, but ha 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 ha. And then people start telling stories about mooses and when they were in the boundary water and forget about the ground. No, bring them back here. The funnier one is the project on drug addiction that said that drug cabinet is going to be locked and the keys will be kept by the post-doctoral felons. All right, you don't want to be the center of humor at the review session. Okay, the 4 C's: complete, compelling, centered, and conclusive. So maybe that's another one that you want to print out and post, that you see it frequently. Start with an outline, 1 point for each paragraph. Sacrifice the space by using this approach to make the reviewers happy and interested and less tired. Bullets and lists, short, simple sentences, transition between paragraphs, keep related information together. Other thing that's not written here is, if it has been a while that you mentioned something important, remind the reviewers of it. Every once in a while, remind them that this relates to this gap in knowledge, that this is important because, so on and so forth. All right, back to the different sections, and we'll go through them. About writing, again, use simple vocabulary that saves on space and gives the same meaning. Large number of, just say many, along the lines like, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter, it's not a killer if you use some of these every once in a while. But if you're out of space, then be direct. Same thing for verbs and actions. Make a decision, just say decide, cause the decrease, decreased, and so on. We talked about abbreviations. I'm not going to go through it again, but you read this and it's as clear as mud. And it's not just in writing. Sometimes I notice with my graduate students and postdocs, when we have a visitor to the lab, a seminar speaker or something, and we go around the table, tell them, you guys, what you're doing in the lab. Some of the students handle it the same way. I'm looking at MPP effect on SPP and the speakers. Can you please tell me what these are? So it's a part of your ever being developed elevator speech that you have to have a description of what you're doing that's understandable by everybody and it appeals to everybody. So that when you're applying for a job and you just meet a manager or something and they say, hey, what do you do? And you just tell them this. It's very clear to them. If you meet a scientist, it's also very clear to them. Questions? Yes, sir.
So, the way I've been taught, there's a bit of a considerable difference between basic research and applied research. I'm wondering your opinion on how that comes out in an application, not only who it goes to, but how it's written.
Basic research versus applied research. Are you looking into worms' movement by any chance?
Sorry?
Are you looking into how worms move by any chance?
It's very interesting to know.
Thank you. Sorry for having insulted you. So you still need significance and impact. What type of knowledge we're going to be developing? A good example is, say, people who started looking at restriction enzymes in bacteria many, probably decades ago. They were looking at them from a certain angle, repair and resistance and so on and so forth. We had no idea that restriction enzymes will be the foundation of cloning and DNA editing and all of this. Without it, it would have been lost. People who developed chromatography, same thing. We had no idea that it would have so many applications in life. So you have to be looking forward, anticipating what is the impact of your findings. Basic research is very important. It's just getting more difficult to fund because applicants believe that the reviewers see the impact, or perceive the impact. And maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. So it's on you to make sure that you're providing as much evidence as possible. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Talking about the significance and impact, so our research maybe can be aimed at very big goals like spatial science, but what we actually do is some very specific research. So when we write the significance, do we write very general ones so people can understand, or we need to be a little deeper? Like how deep we should go to focus on the significance?
The significance, how to write a significant statement. You have to be very specific. You cannot say what we used to say, that answering these questions will shed more light on Alzheimer's disease treatment. That doesn't stand anymore. That doesn't work anymore. What I should be saying is my basic research in looking at molecules of potential use for treatment of Alzheimer's, and why do I think there is this possible link between my basic research and taking these compounds to further steps of drug development and testing, and how they are going to be used. And why am I pursuing this is because there's lack of effective drugs for treating Alzheimer's dementia. Yeah?
Yeah, so when I'm writing, I'm always haven't find the level of if I write too specifically, I'm worried people maybe from different areas or similar areas will get lost in this very specific technique innovation. And if I write too generalized, people might just think it's over exaggerated because we are doing some specific research. So
right. You have to write. The question is how to write the impact or significance are appeal to both the experts and the non-experts. I think to be specific in terms of terminology and methodology and so on, that's with experimental design. When you write the significance part, this has to be understood by everybody. You're not going to be, by being specific, I don't mean specific wording or whatever. It's just a specific idea that you have, or specific, your imagination of how most likely your work will develop something that is helpful to life. in general, whatever that aspect of life is. So do not say, my research will improve life. You have to fill in the steps of how you think. What are the steps that your research is going to go to this life? It doesn't have to go to the end. No one does research from A to C. We all do steps and build on each other. But it has to be going in that direction. That your research will start here, will end at C. Someone will pick it up at C and hopefully move it to L and then to Z at the very end. You have to provide this clear demonstration. Yes?
Beyond just being like Mozart and out compelling any issues, do you have any specific advice on outwriting or navigating granting agencies where there may be some politics involved?
Yeah, politics are included in the like elements. Politics would be involved even at the NIH level. There are reviewers who just are wedded to a certain direction, certain hypothesis. They hate any other science that proposes otherwise, especially those ones that are trying to prove them wrong. So that's a topic. Is it politics of the granting agency itself or the reviewers?
Well, as a specific example, my colleague and I here work in agriculture, and there's the Rapid Response Fund in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Gabby works with poultry, I work with horses, and there's a bit more economic impact, and there is not a horse seat on the reviewers board, and so any proposals that I have that have a large impact in the industry get overlooked because it's other livestock seats, and they have some lobbying there.
Yes. Okay. One way to approach it is to try to find a way to convince the reviewers that your finding in horses may be applicable in other species. That horses share their metabolic profile with cows or dogs, and maybe. Well, I'm working on horses, but this applies to all of you. It's going to benefit. Or if you're working on horses, an infectious disease, well, this is transferable to your cows. So the cow people should really worry about this as much as I do. Yeah? Yes?
So on the topic of abbreviations, how do you balance minimizing those with like satisfying expert reviewers? I know you talked about gene knockout. So if you're doing like multiplex gene knockout, you're not going to skip the abbreviations. So it's going to be onerous for them to read. So are you saying to be as general as possible and then just like have it minimally, or?
Yeah, I mean, minimize it. Yeah, use abbreviation for things that are repeated over and over and over and over and over. But sometimes you see somebody giving an acronym for something that has never been repeated even once after that. It's just an addiction to use acronyms. So if there's something like the example that you mentioned, yeah, that's good. And if it has been 3 pages or so since you first mentioned it and mentioned the acronym, I would put the full name and the acronym again on page 3. And then after that, I would use the acronym. But not everything that could be acromanized should have an acronym. Things that are rarely mentioned or infrequently mentioned, that I would avoid. Things of common knowledge like PCR, HPLC, and so on. Yeah, there's no trouble about this. Here and then here.
Sir, how generous should we be on the figures and graphics, such that it's not going to look too unprofessional?
Well, my graphics used to be unprofessional because we had very little graphics tools. Your graphics guys rock. So it's just really a bunch of circles and arrows. Circles could be questions and how they are related to the hypothesis, or vice versa hypothesis. Or you can have the aims, the questions, the various questions and how they are connected to each other. It's question number one. We'll go to question number two, and then it will go to prove or disprove the hypothesis. But it's simple, simple graphics. Just use it as a guide. Yes, and then yes.
So not preliminary data, is that, we were talking about graphics.
Sorry. Graphics about preliminary data.
On the same topic, would you then include some preliminary data as a figure?
Yes.
So for the fellowship description, like from the university or from the specific agency, the introduction might be very general, and when we write the fellowship, we might need to fit into their goals. So, and I think the applicants they are seeking is like they are having some specific qualities or some specific directions they are seeking. So how can we find out the information, like what type of qualities they are seeking?
Well, all agencies have posted information about the eligibility and review criteria. And in addition to this, you can always call for the program officer or the person who is responsible for this program and discuss this with you and say, how do you see this paralleling the interest of the agency that you're working with? And they're very honest to say, oh, we used to fund this, but not anymore. Or, oh yeah, that's a very good topic. But you can always have a paragraph that says significance to the agency. And if you really want to put it in their face, very clear, significance to the agency. And you mention why the project is important and why your background training, you are the best one to do this project. And that the result is going to serve this agency in many ways, as many ways as possible. Yes, sir. You had a question behind that? You had a question? Oh, yes. Hi.
So earlier you spoke about conveying a passion in the writing. And so I guess I have two questions. One is, I guess, what sort of language do you use to convey that? And two, I would feel like it's also kind of difficult because, these applications need to be pretty concise and short. And I feel like a lot of passion could be lost because you have to cut fat a little bit. So how do you balance that?
I mean, your passion cannot be expressed as I am psyched.
Right.
But you can say it in a way that why I went to graduate school is because of my interest in sport health. You don't mention the aunt story that we all put in our application, who has diabetes. So, and this project, and it shows the lab that fits this, and that your project is very commensurate with your passion about this specific direction in the field. And that's when you want to, if you want to address passion very briefly. But by passion, I meant your own convincing of being passionate about what you are proposing. It's gonna be reflected. You don't have to even design it. It's gonna come out, with the feeling that this person really loves horses or loves whatever. Yes, sir.
When you're potentially talking to program officers, how much information do you usually give them? Just like a half draft of your aims page, or to kind of let them prompt them about what you want to talk to them about before you do that?
I think the best approach is to email them first and email this type of information to them. And just say, I want to talk to you in general about the relevance of this to the agency. You want to make sure that you're not asking them for a commitment. They do not have that authority and they're not going to give it to you. It's just compare it to what you're seeing, because they do attend review sessions and see proposals that make it and don't. And they actually know, after proposals are reviewed, they go to council. The council decides, well, this is our main goal this year. So the council can sometimes skip scores and go to a bad score, not mediocrely score a grant, say, no, this fits our goal, we want this funded, for example. So program officers can give you this information. But the more you provide them with ahead of time, the more time you will give them to think of what is the best answer to give you. Yes, and then yes. Please.
When I'm sort of zooming in on my novel question, just shedding light on white space. How do I go about citing other authors who are worked in a similar space, but I want to bounce off of their research? Is there a special section for citations, or in the paragraph do I include patents or papers that I would like to cite? How do I do that?
Yeah, you just mention them as they come. So in the background, whoever did work in that direction, you mention, or what findings, and then you cite them. Same thing for methodology. Yeah.
I guess your feedback on when you have optional portions, so one of the ones we're looking at has like this optional introductory application portion. It's almost like calling them and so to let them know whether they'd be interested, and then you submit your application, but it's optional. So what do you think about those? Like, is it worth spending a month or two on prior? And then
Should you contact them a
it's
couple
like
of
an
months
optional
prior?
part of the application, like for STIR, STTR applications, there's an optional portion for asking them whether they think it's relevant or not. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
it is definitely worth it. I love agencies who make this available.
Okay.
Because then you have little effort and then you know is it green light or just stop and go. Not that's another road. It's green. Yes, sir.
I think we're at about time.
Oh,
You said
we are. Yes, sorry. The rest of the stuff you're going to get the slides. Please, if you would give them my email address, or I'll ask Mauro to give it to you. If you have any specific questions, I'll be glad to answer. Even volunteer to review proposals for you for free. But hopefully you'll give me enough time, a week or something like that. So I'm all for you to develop and become independent so that I can retire and sail on the Mediterranean. Thank you so much.
And just as a reminder, you can sign up for the COGS Review Committee, like he suggested. Never pass up an opportunity to review other grants to see what good grants look like. And grants for spring travel and career developments are due the week before spring break. We just changed the dates because I guess spring break's different this year, but yeah. Everything should be updated on the website and all good.
Do you know the closest out
Exit?
to go to the metro? I have to walk all around the building.
For a bus line?
No, the transit.
The green line?
Right.
Yeah, it's over, I don't know if you can get there by tunnel or not, so you'd have to go up
That's fine.
and then past the library, and then there's that part where the bridge is, and you can go up or down, you go down there, and then go left, and then right. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
I have handouts if you want to